Ryzen 5 5600, base variant, no G, no X, just standard Ryzen 5 5600. Anyways, standard AM4 socket with a AM4 motherboard. Look for the gold piece on the CPU itself, if I could get the camera to focus. Look for the gold corner on the CPU itself, which will be this corner right here. Gonna look for the corner on the socket, which is right there. Don't want any dust between the CPU and the motherboard. Just slot it in, push the arm down and over. Congratulations, you've built a computer. I mean, technically, with some extracurriculars. Which, honestly, I just got this because it was cheap, good. It's 32 gigabytes DDR4 3600. Not super ultra low latency. I only spent like 20 bucks on this kit. When it comes to RAM, don't be afraid. RAM is relatively durable. Generally what you're looking for is firm clicks or one massive firm click. Ideally it's just the one massive one. Ideally you'd be using two hands, one on one side, one on the other, and then you just push down, or you could do like me because I have to use my phone to record and just thumb across the entire thing. Push down as hard as you can. It gets you still two distinct clicks, but it's as good as you're gonna get. Let me reseat this other one, which I'm realizing is uneven, so I'm just gonna pull it out. Check for any debris in the socket, which I don't see any, so I'm just gonna make sure it's still lining up. Notch with the notch inside the socket. See that piece of plastic there? You want that to line up with the hole. Or like generally line up with it. Don't line it up perfectly, because again, it'll guide it down for you, because either side has these clips which act as a guide. You just want to make sure that that hole is in the right spot. Just shove it down. Yeah, this is why I wanted to do this one first. I might have to take the other one out just to... Oh, there we are. That's a good seed. That one's even. Now, at this point, most people would just go, oh, alright, I have everything booted in. I could just plug into one of these displays here. No. AM4, this is not a 5600G, so I don't have integrated graphics, which means I need to get the graphics card in to test. This is a pretty hefty card, so I'm just gonna pray that it doesn't break anything. Now, would I recommend anybody purchase this exact card? Hell no, don't buy this exact card. Get an RX 6650 XT. It's so much better. You can get it for around the same price you can get this one. And also don't get this exact model, because I've learned that MSI locked it down really hard for some reason. It looks really cool, just know that this version, this specific OEM model is locked down. Oh, I guess it's not an OEM model. But this specific partner model, I guess, is locked down. So just know that. Also, yes, I have used this GPU before. This box has been opened many times. Whenever I repackage stuff, I repackage it to the best of my ability back to the way it was. So, I think I even still have I think I even put the things back in. No, I did not put the plugs back in. That would have been responsible of me. Oh, and for those of you wondering the power supply I'm going to be using in this build, it's a Smart BM2 650 watt. Please don't get this. Spend the money on an extra, proper modular power supply. This power supply is so bad. I haven't had any major problems with it, but just get full modular. Semi-modular sucks. PSA to motherboard manufacturers: if you're going to have a user's manual with your board and you're going to label the front panel, at least within the manual, at the very least, have a diagram of it. Like, there's a diagram of the I/O, but there's no diagram for the front panel. So now I have to look it up, because even if this is standard and it's the normal, I think it's like the top right two pins are the normal turn on, turn off. You never know, so always look up a manual for what board you have. In my case, GAA320M S2H. And that revision number does actually matter, so pay attention to smaller details like that, because, yeah. frustrating that there's no diagram for the front panel I/O, because of course there isn't. So yeah, it turns out it is literally just the top right pins of the power switch, that's pretty much the standard across most motherboard manufacturers, except the ones who don't do it like that, because fuck you, I guess. I don't fucking know. So in this case, I'm going to be shorting out those two pins right there in the top above my finger. I need to get power to this thing first and a monitor over here though, so I'm gonna do another PSA I didn't think I would have to do, but don't do what I did here. Don't plug straight into the outlet long term. Get a surge protector of some kind. You're gonna thank me after 3 years when that one power outage trips a breaker somewhere or some short happens. Just trust me, don't do what I'm doing right now, which is straight to the wall. I'm only doing this because I only intend on this system being powered on for a short period of time where it is unlikely there will be a brownout, blackout, or other such possible surge. But these outlets, especially in American homes, are not protected, and your power supply will not be expecting a surge from the wall. It'll be expecting a surge from inside the computer. So get a surge protector, and a proper, like not a power strip, a surge protector, preferably with a breaker inside of it. Look up for good ones. Some of them are worse than others. There's a bunch of videos on it. You just look it up, find a decent one, get it, and use that. Don't do what I'm doing right now as a permanent solution. Well, I mean, my permanent solution is off a surge protector, so do that. Do what I'm doing with the surge protector. Don't do what I'm doing with this test bench right now for long term. Also, I'm not a complete psychopath. I am putting a cooler on it, like for the test run, don't get me wrong. I'm just not putting thermal paste on it, because I don't need it to be perfect conductivity. It just needs a heatsink to dump a small amount of heat into, so something will be better than nothing. Also, it's not going to post unless I plug a CPU fan into it. So that's a big thing, is if you're doing a test run, even if you aren't putting a cooler on it, you have to plug cooler in, otherwise it will not run, like it will not start up or do anything. So these pins need to be connected to a fan of some kind, preferably a dedicated CPU fan. Anyways, let's turn the power supply on. Whenever you turn the power supply on, be ready to immediately turn it off in case something goes horrendously wrong. Nothing did in this case. So I'm going to take my trusty old metallic screwdriver. I'm going to locate the pins that I need to short. I'm going to very carefully just touch them with the screwdriver tip. And then the CPU fan starts spinning to life. That's a good sign. I do have a display hooked up. I have power hooked up to the GPU and everything. So we should theoretically see an output if this is working. This is like gonna be a first time boot for like a long time, so there you are. We have it posted. Now I'm going to quickly turn it off. And yes, I did short the pins to turn it off, just because I'm trying to keep it safely turned off. Oh, I hit the reset switch instead. There we are. That'll happen sometimes. Nobody's perfect. Now time to put all of this into the case. And some thermal paste on that CPU cooler. I should probably start off. Another tip, remove the GPU. I only used it because I did not have integrated graphics. If you have integrated graphics on your CPU, do not use the GPU that you have gotten if you got a dedicated GPU, which you should. Integrated graphics are terrible. Do not use it in a test bench setting. Do not use a dedicated GPU on a like if you're just making sure the CPU and the rest of this boots, because you're putting pressure on the PCIe mount, which normally would be put onto the case, but because there is no case to hold the GPU up, that pressure will be on the PCIe, so you don't want to do that. And crucially, if you do have to do it, remove the GPU before you put the motherboard in. Leave everything else, leave the RAM, CPU cooler, unless it's like an AIO or something. Just leave it. And then put all of that in there. The GPU is the only thing that you put in last. Well, the power supply, I guess, but the power supply, that one's pretty obvious for anybody. Just the GPU thing, I've seen so many people do it. Don't. Please don't. God, that is how you break PCIe slots. Whenever you're putting on your CPU cooler, there will be a point in time when you're screwing it in that it just freezes up. Some of them, they'll give you a little bit of resistance over time, but if you have no resistance and suddenly a lot of resistance, stop. Do not go further. If it is providing so much resistance all of a sudden, don't continue screwing in that screw and move on to the next. Do not screw one screw all the way down, then move on to the next. You want to screw one halfway down, then go to the opposite corner. So if you were started off on this screw, you'd move over to this one, screw it down halfway, then halfway, then you finish the same pattern you started. Seems complicated, but it's pretty much, you just want to do the opposites so you get pressure down straight instead of lopsided. So if you do the diagonals, the center will actually put pressure down instead of if you did the sides where it would just put the pressure over here and it would make it impossible for you to screw down over here. So you want to do opposites. That's pretty much it. Just do opposite corners. Yeah. I've realized now that I'm in a bit of predicament because I didn't take the storage out yet. And the storage I'm going to be using for this build is in here. Yeah, that's gonna take a second to get at. Sorry, did I say we were using that other case? No, we're using this case from, don't ask me why. Top-mounted power supply, except I don't think my power supply is gonna fit in this one either. So, I don't even know where to start with this board. Is that a spider? Oh my god, it is. I'm sorry, buddy. You chose the wrong place. I'm gonna be putting that on its side. Please, if you're installing a motherboard, it's a very simple thing to do. Pick up the case and put it on its side. Simple. Do this. Please, put it on its side. It makes it so much easier. You aren't an expert. No need to install it standing up. Anyways, I'm gonna get to that. Here's another thing, the I/O shield. When you're going to install it, you're going to want to make sure everything lines up with the board itself, and you want to make sure that nothing's upside down. And the reason you want to make sure that nothing's upside down is so that, you know, everything lines up for one, but for two, you also want to push that in as far as you can. So like, that there's no, notice how there's no holes along the side there, right? This way I could just straight up install it without having to worry about anything. Once I put the motherboard in, I'm gonna lift it in slowly and make sure it lines up with those holes and everything. And then I will start screwing into these holes. Alright, so these screws don't fit into the fan, so I'm just gonna zip tie the fan on. Because the screws are just completely loose, like, yeah. To be clear, the fan is being held in place, but when it starts spinning, I'm just gonna zip tie it just to be safe. For those of you who are wondering how I would go about zip tying it, I'm just gonna use 4 zip ties, or 2 for this side, just kind of mount it down here. So as you see, I have the sides alternated so that they can go into each other like that, and I can pinch it down really hard. That way it gets like actual stability. Also because I don't have a way to feed it back through, because 1, these zip ties aren't long enough for that, and it's 2, I just don't have any other smaller holes to do it through like I did on my other case, so I'm just gonna do it this way. And I know people are like, zip ties aren't a permanent solution. Shut up. There's no other way I'm getting this fucking fan mounted, and this thing is gonna need some intake. I've experienced a lot of physical pain in making this build, but here's the end result so far. The front panel, USB, and headers had to be put in by hand with the GPU in place because I'm stupid and I put the GPU in too quick. Pretty much I'm just at the point where I just put everything back together and it just works. So cut to it just working. Alright, so here's the final build. Here's what it looks like on the outside. It's a little scuff, but I cleaned it up with a towel and some water. Everything's good. I've got everything plugged in. Now it's time for the moment of truth. Gotta open this up and press power button. That would be the fan. That is a great fan, truly. Other than that, everything else in the build went pretty well. There was no software issues. I just went through the Windows installer as normal, and it installed perfectly fine. I used Christatis Tech's Windows utility, the ultimate Windows utility. I used it to debloat Windows. I went with the standard desktop tweaks. I also used it to install the suite of applications that my friend was going to use, mainly Discord, their web browser of choice, Steam, and a couple other miscellaneous things. I installed the GPU drivers separately, obviously, and other than that, no setup was really done. I set up using a local account. It was pretty much just textbook. Most people aren't going to need to set up using a local account, and I'm not going to tell you how to do that because it's going to be outdated next month because Microsoft is constantly changing it. So if you don't want to link a Microsoft account but you still want to use Windows, just Google whatever variant of Windows you're trying to use, the date that it currently is or year, and how to make a local account. And that should lead you towards the tips and tricks you can use to bypass the Windows Microsoft account requirement, which is, in my opinion, bullshit, and a whole host of other things that I'm not going to say here. But yeah, other than that, everything's fine. The system is currently deployed, functioning as expected. I would highly recommend not replicating this build, because this build was basically my old PC minus the case and RAM from 2 years ago. It was a pretty decent budget system back then, but nowadays you can get much better parts for the same price. I would highly recommend looking into the modern Ryzen 7000 and RX 7000 parts, because they are pretty decent price to performance. I would also highly recommend getting a fully modular power supply, and the case doesn't really matter, just make sure that it has all the features you need it to have. As for CPU cooler and RAM, it entirely depends what CPU you get. I'm pretty sure there is a spreadsheet for what types of RAM are best for what CPU you have. And I know that there's also the spreadsheet for storage. I don't know how to link it because I've never personally used it, but look it up. I'm sure you'll find it. It's probably going to be top result on Google. And for anybody who wants more content like this, either subscribe to the channel, go to my Patreon, etc. You can also watch other people, obviously, who are better at this and are actually funded. The first ones that come to mind, obviously, Atlantis Tech Tips, but there's also Gamers Nexus, otherwise known as Tech Jesus, and ZTT Builds. I would highly recommend going to them if you are new. I can guarantee that they will be helpful. Anyways, have a good day, night, or evening, depending on whichever time you're watching this at, and yeah, that's it for now.